Welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Greetings. Welcome to Lead Live. I am so honored to be able to talk about topics that are so critical to our overall well-being. And central to Lead Live, and LEAD standing for Leadership Excellence and Achievement on Demand, is the centrality or the importance of being an executive in your own life, your own CEO. And the topic we're going to cover today with a remarkable man, Anand is his name, is the topic of the value and importance of self-branding. We say value and importance for emphasis. Value in terms of its utility or usefulness, importance in terms of significance, its consequence. The consequence of self-branding is not to be taken lightly. Of course, within industry, within one's company, within one's even neighborhood or family. What is self-branding? It's the ability to develop a unique identity that literally separates you, or for that matter, other individuals from other individuals. Separate you and make you that much more identifiable, relatable, significant, depending upon what it is that you're about. What's the other part? It takes your reputation and career from relative unknown to where you've got a significant amount of visibility. I'm looking at my computer here because I'm looking at the gentleman that I want to just bring on board right now. So Jet, would you please bring him to the forefront as I introduce him, not to embarrass him, but to honor this young man. He's an engineering manager for Mark III, a public safety software company. And over the past decade, this gentleman has progressed from starting as an aspiring engineer to becoming an engineering leader. Emphasis added, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Anand also is a startup advisor. He's a volunteer board member, and he is an established engineering leadership coach, plus a tech mentor outside of his formal professional role. He loves discussions and learning around engineering culture, team dynamics, and new advancements in technology. He's based in Canada, Montreal, Canada, and his organization is not just based in New York, but has its impact across the country and beyond. So, but we're not here to talk about his company in particular, although he may mention some things. We're here to talk about you, me, all of us, and the capacity to not only brand ourselves in intentional ways, but to leverage that branding in order to experience the success that we want to experience for ourselves, for our companies, for our neighborhoods, for our community. And so, with that said, I'd like to ask you, Anand, to tell us something about you, who you are, that we would not learn online. You can't find it in social media, that it distinguishes you and it's part of your brand.
Thank you, Dr. Webb, for the kind introduction. Really humbled to be on this show today, talking about the importance of self-branding. As you said, I have gone from an aspiring engineer to an engineering leader, currently at Mark 43, which is a public safety SaaS company. So really, really inspired by the mission of my current company to keep our community safer for all of us here. A thing that you asked about, something that would go beyond my usual introduction that is stated is, and I will touch upon that during the talk or conversation, is I have been an introvert pretty much in my engineering individual contributor journey, which is really opposite to what people might perceive for an engineering leader or someone appearing on a talk or a podcast giving valuable information or just talking about their past experiences. So this has been definitely been a transition for me to be at the center stage of not only this conversation, but even when I'm leading teams or I'm managing direct reports in their own success and failures and growth journeys. So the growth mindset, my own personal branding has had a lot to do over my decade worth of transition. It's not that I have changed fundamentally as a person, but there are things like confidence and experience and then just outlook on things which has kind of definitely had an impact on how I can appear as a more extrovert person while still being a little introverted at start of most new conversations, relationships, or engagements.
I love that. And I love it for a number of reasons because there's a lot of folks who are leading who are naturally introverted. And I join you. I as a kid, I struggled to speak publicly, and I'll never forget my first time as an undergrad student. I was in my sophomore year, I believe, and I was in an upper class course. I don't even know how I ended up there, and I was the youngest kid in that class, and one of the few people of color. Only I think there was only two black folks out of I don't know. It was a pretty large class. In any event, in my work team, they uh, directed me, so I felt, to lead the presentation of our final exam, which I thought was absolutely crazy. They had expertise and lived experiences that I didn't have. And it was in that moment of having to present and then being told something that shook me out of my comfort zone that I realized I could do more than just fill in the blank. And all of a sudden, I realized that Vista was mine. And so when I say remarkable in describing you, when I wrote brilliant in describing you, it was really to honor the fact that you're not just someone who is highly well educated, who's well read, who is invested. You're someone who's chosen to move out of your comfort zone in order to have greater impact, greater influence. And I think that's powerful. And so I'm proud of you and I honor you in that regards. Because this
Yeah,
speaks volumes about what we all can do, right?
yeah, absolutely. This is really, really great that you shared your own experience because, as you said, like I've always been a good student academically. I've always done well, top my class. Always have led projects, shown initiative, kind of met all my goals. But all that time, I was always doing my work and then hoping that my work will be noticed actually. So just I would not run after reward and recognition, or I would not keep on amplifying or sharing the work I did. And that is kind of what made me kind of an introvert, that not doing enough self branding. When I was an engineer, actually,
Mhm.
I would do the task assigned to me really well and hope that this will just kind of tie into my overall progression or recognition, actually. So that was an aspect that I realized that. If I am doing something well, or if I have uh, I would say, experiences and insights to share with the folks because based on my current mentorship engagements or even the paid forward notion, that is when I realized that the only way to give back to the community is start speaking and sharing actually.
Mhm.
So there is a lot of work being generated, done, and put out, but how do you connect it to make it visible to the world?
Mm.
So that path or the transformation on making it visible and talking and interacting with people, hearing about their current situations and scenarios was a key part actually that this realization caused me to be kind of what I am now and what I'm doing in this present day actually.
That's interesting. I'm going to ask you a question that I always get asked, and I always wonder why do people ask it? And it's weird. I'm going to ask it of you. And that is what whether it's a parent or a sibling or another person with whom you experience a lot of contact, or some stranger or someone you've never met, who are among the folks who have inspired you to get out of that confined space beyond just the clear thinking on your part?
Yeah, I think I would attribute a lot of that to my family, and especially my parents, in terms of how they instilled this sense of in me early on, that it's not being too self-critical or raising the bar higher, but just always having self-belief in your own potential, that you could do better actually. So as soon as you achieve a success and goal, that should not become your comfort zone or baseline, that this is what I do and this is it. That should just kind of become a step in your ladder or journey, because until you discover what is beyond this, you won't realize what is left to still explore, discover, learn actually. So whether it was me completing school and doing my bachelor's in India, I realized post that there is more to this field, and I don't want to immediately start working in a corporate role. So I went for my master's actually to do that and discover a little bit more. Then I moved into a corporate role doing quality engineering. I discovered there's more to quality in terms of how this actual code is built. And those are kind of the building blocks that ultimately led me to kind of finding my niche, which I kind of always knew, that is centered around leadership, mentorship, and just team development and engineering cultures.
It's so interesting because I'm smiling because I'm thinking about one of my brothers. Actually, I could be thinking about more than one brother, but one in particular, Ernesto. And I'm thinking about one of my nephew-in-law, Sam, both engineers in their respective areas, and how Sam chose to take on more and he was brilliant a mechanical engineer and now a project manager. And the wiring of engineers, you all seems to be, of course, you all different as individuals, but you've got some comparable things, and you have a lot of things in common, which is to look at, to analyze, to uh, begin at the end. What is the solution you're trying to get to? Walk backwards and then work out a plan to get to that end, right? Am I correct? I
Yeah,
mean, that you could say that about anyone who's a smart, sound leader. And yet that is embedded within the engineering psychic, I think, right?
correct.
And so you're predisposed. Doesn't mean you're going to be, but you seem to be predisposed towards, maybe you are towards engineering, and maybe you are towards leadership. What do you say to that? Because I know you've thought about leadership in relationship to the engineering profession. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of the first thing you want, or people like of our psyche forces us to jump to a solution, because as soon as something starts irritating or bothering us, we want to get done with it, right? Because we don't want something to get on our nerves or just kind of bother us for a long time. And that is kind of what engineers tend to do, is find the quickest and the kind of not efficient solution. So at least you are past that mental hurdle or barrier, kind of barrier in your head, that this is not an unsolvable problem. Well, I know at least a way to solve it now. Maybe that's not the most efficient or optimized way actually. So as long as you are at peace that you have a solution to a certain problem, that is where creativity can step in, right?
Mhm.
You know that you are able to address that if needed in the absolute worst possible manner, but it will work for the short term and the interim. Now you find out ways to kind of polish your solution, even optimize your approach, and that is where the magic happens in terms of your end solution. And this we see with even entrepreneurship, right? When great entrepreneurs kind of talk about their humble beginnings of their own product driven companies, they would often showcase prototypes they built in their own backyard with strings and duct tapes actually. And then the mature final product is so different. And this is the same with the mindset or our transformation. It is an iterative process, and it needs improvement at each stage actually.
That is so powerful. You just gave me chills. When anyone says anything that has, is profound at its core, I get chills. And that is even the whole notion of being successful is an iterative process. And along the way, you're testing, you're creating, you're changing, you're experiencing the results that on the surface may be pure failure. And an outsider might come in and say, "Oh my God, that's failure. Failed. Leave it alone." And you realize that's just a part of the process to get to the level of success you want to achieve, right? It's
Correct.
integral. Yeah, powerful. So I know folks who came here just to hear about branding, wants to hear what do we mean by self-branding?
Yeah.
Can you share that?
Right. So for me personally, self branding basically means creating a persona of yourself, not yourself in general. It's basically a combination of all the things that you stand for and believe in, the characteristics and the traits. So for me, in a sentence, self branding or personal branding is a combination of values, beliefs, and goals actually
Mhm.
that you focus on or that you want to share with the wider group, and that just ends up becoming your persona depending on whoever the target audience is. We'll talk or I'll share a little bit more about not to get too much caught up on building a persona. There's a difference when I talk about self branding and building a public image. We don't want to build a certain image in that regard. We want to be our own selves, actually, that this is
Mhm.
what I believe in. There is no right or wrong. This is just the school of thought or the opinion that I have based on my experiences and insights, actually. And that is just a type of brand. We don't need to mimic or we don't need to tend
Mhm.
to drift towards a certain brand, actually. There is no kind of brand that is righteous and the others are not. To each their own is kind of the key undertaking.
What I hear you really saying is encouraging people to be their authentic self,
Correct.
whoever that is, under going deep within. And I'm thinking about it. I don't know why I'm thinking about family right now, but I'm thinking about another family member, a niece. I just had a conversation with her this morning, Amber, and about how, essentially in a very efficient period of time in our phone call, she talked about this transformation that she's gone through and how she's much more comfortable in her skin. She's always been brilliant. She's always been beautiful. She's always been loving and all that. But now it's like the integration. It's one thing for people to tell you, Anan, you're brilliant. It's another thing for you to actually experience it and then feel empowered by it, right? People can tell you anything. You're handsome, you're smart, you've got a great family, blah, blah, blah. But unless and until you feel it and you experience it and you leverage it, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
And self branding is really a process of getting to that level of authenticity that you can't give to people. You can talk about it, but we want you, those who are viewing, if you haven't gone through that process, go through it. And I think that's what life is all about. We come here as infants, as these gems that hopefully we're honored by our parents and those who have us. Unfortunately, too many of us are not.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we are. And we are socialized by society. And too many of us are focused on trying to please society that we negate ourselves. And then, if we're fortunate enough, we get older 60s, 70s, 80s, and before we transition, we're so busy trying to get to that authentic self again.
Yeah.
So we're saying, don't wait, do it now.
Yeah, and to your point, to just add to that, authenticity is a huge piece because it can not being authentic or just trying to use someone else brands and belief can give you short-term success, but that is not what is sustainable and will make you satisfactory success in the long run actually. So it's always the case that whatever your beliefs or experience are, you will find a target audience as long as you make an effort. So don't feel that just because somebody's beliefs are kind of valued more right now does not mean that they are the norm and you should just blindly follow or just reshare them. You should have your own authentic version on take on it, and that will encourage more people to be open, transparent, and showcase their more vulnerable side.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And there's so many folks throughout history that have tried to remind us all because they've gone through their own self-exploration and self-branding, whether they called it that or not, where they became more of their authentic self, whether they were 15 or they were 30 or they were 85 or 102. The key thing is life is a vista. We get to explore it, right?
Yeah.
And can you speak to life being a vista in a sense? And we're going to come back to this branding and get to more concrete details.
Yeah, to that point, as you said, right, that there are so many experiences and just connections out there that people don't realize if they continue to be in their comfort zone, actually. And one of the things that I want to say with self branding is there's again a difference on self branding versus being self centered, actually.
Right.
Not being self centered, because that means you're too egoistic or holding your opinions too dear. All you want to do is connect with the community, and connect with people and collaborate by stating your opinion, and then also being a good listener and receptive of what others have to say, actually. So this is building an audience where you can harbor a safe space for communication, and that is where the life aspect come in, that at different points in life and through different kind of phases, you will have different connections or different, I would say, target audience, and the notion will continue to change and evolve, actually. So just trying to keep an open mind along with your own self branding is important as well, actually.
You said something earlier in your definition, or you used an adjective to describe self-branding. You said values. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes, I did say that.
Can you define values? Because I think when you do that, you automatically are wired in ways that you just articulated. Can you define values from your perspective?
Yeah, so I mentioned three things, which is values, beliefs, and goals.
Mhm.
Goals are transitionary, right? What can seem a goal now, if you achieve it in a week, the goals can change, actually. Beliefs are still, you believe in something, actually, but it's not become a core value. Beliefs are often kind of evolving over time as you are subject to more information, or as you learn more things. Your beliefs can either go more kind of deep in terms of you strongly believe that, or it could kind of scale back in terms of I used to believe in this, we often say, but now I'm not so sure, actually. So beliefs are also a little bit less static in that sense, but values are at the core, actually. So for example, when I went back to the experience regarding during my upbringing at school or just in general, my parents used to motivate me that we believe you have potential and we see that if you just put yourself a little more, because I knew that if I spend only 4 hours, I would still be in the top 10% of my class. But if I spent that extra fifth hour, actually, then I could probably top my class. That was not the goal, but that was just me realizing my potential and giving my best effort. So that is a value that now is has kind of just settled in me, actually, that when I'm looking at a new problem or just trying to find a solution, I will not settle on the first one. I believe that I can spend a little more time, and there will be something better that will come out of that. So that is a value that I have instilled right from me in the start, actually. So for me, values are at the core, and really static, that they should not change. Beliefs and goals can change to an extent, but values will never change in terms of defining who we are as a person or characteristic. And that will be kind of the essence of self branding, because you can share a belief, but who knows that you would stick to that belief in 6 months from now. But you can share a value and you can be certain that that is not going to change for your lifetime.
Like the value for others, the value for
Correct.
listening, the
Yeah,
value for listening to understand first rather than to be understood, quote Covey and others.
absolutely.
Um, so the benefit of branding. What are some
Yeah.
of the benefits of branding?
Right. So the benefit of branding, as I see it, is they can help you get the right validation and support. Because as I said, that when I was an individual contributor, I used to do the work, and but I always wanted to do more work in terms of I was doing a project, but I wanted to even take up on bigger projects. I felt I was ready, but nobody around me knew that because I did not share that with anyone actually. So branding can really help put the word out there actually, because and I realized more and more that I would say that I want to get involved in hiring for our teams, because I believe that retaining and hiring top talent with the right diversity and inclusion notion in mind is huge actually. I want to work with amazing people and hear about their experiences actually. So once I started to share that with my manager, I realized how much they were looking for engineers who would be willing to spend time in hiring great other engineers. Of other people thought that this was an additional thing that they had to do on the job actually, but for me it was such a unique value add experience that I wanted to do it to make sure that we're building best teams at all times. So the importance, one of the core benefits of branding is there might already be a counter demand out there, and as soon as you put it out, you will be amazed in terms of how much there is a need for the kind of things that you value or what you're trying to achieve, or how much other people who, as I said, were not kind of courageous enough up until that point to share that, they thought it is too naive, or they thought that there is no kind of benefit in just putting it out there, like who would bother to listen to what I have to say. And then you realize that there are so many people who share your experience and insights actually, and that just gives you more intrinsic motivation, and it gives you confidence that whatever you are thinking or experiencing really has a kind of a real possibility to make a change actually.
You're on it. You're on it. You're signaling to folks who you are, what you stand for. You're making it clear what your accomplishments have been, why you've had those accomplishments in relationship, really, you're talking about to the mission of that organization. So they can see how you fit more than just as a widget in this particular space,
Correct.
but really as a total human being. And you don't have to be egotistical, as you conveyed very well. In fact, you want to guard against that. You want to be led by your values, and hopefully the values are consistent or aligned, or they highly correlate, or they're integral to the values of the organization that you work for. If it's not your own organization, right? The other thing is we have a tendency of negating the power of branding in terms of leaving a lasting impression. When people see you for the first time, and they may not see you for another 5 years, and then they see you again, and you're either leading a project or you're in a position where you're seeking the opportunity to lead a project that they are responsible for. They gotta remember your energy. They may not remember your name. They
Yeah.
may not even remember where they met you, but they gotta remember something. And that essence will affect their decision making, their behavior in relationship to you. Branding is powerful, folks. I used to tell people years ago, Anand, that when you work in a role, it doesn't matter what that role is, but certainly if you're in a leadership role, you have that role 24/7.
Right.
Because you leave the office does not mean you get to turn that off, take the hat off, take the clothes off, and you're no longer in that role. When you're at the grocery store, when you're walking down the street, people still see you. So in that leadership role, if you're operating authentically, it's perfect. You don't have to switch off and switch on and try to remember who the person was, and it ultimately becomes schizophrenic. The
Right.
ideal is to integrate yourself and to be authentic all the time, and you've got the core set of values that are complementary to others, to the environment. Wow, you're more than steps ahead of the next person who believes he or she has to respond to the external environment rather
Yeah.
than the internal environment first.
You said all of this correctly, like even at the start, like in terms of enthusiasm and curiosity, that is what people will remember you for. If you're self-centered, or if they feel that you are entering a conversation only to get something out of it for your
For
own
self.
benefit,
Hmm.
then you would probably kind of be remembered, and you will over time find that less and less people want to help you, because it is a barter, right? You want to have everyone's best interest at heart, and it starts with being a good listener in that regard, actually, right from the start. The second thing I really like what you said is around being authentic. If I am having a certain body language and a certain way of working with people in this fashion during work, and if the same people meet me or see me at a grocery store and I am a totally different personality, it will confuse them in terms of who is the real me actually. And that is not sustainable even for my own benefit. If you are faking it or just building, that's why I said just an image of yourself versus being your own self, you will realize quickly over time that that will be difficult for you to sustain, and you will not be proud internally of that thing actually. So I really like your call out in that regard, that uh, if it's really easy to be our own selves, then you don't need to think about what situation I'm in or what environment I'm in, because you adapt naturally, but you don't need to craft yourself or change yourself a certain way depending on the environment, actually.
Well, I want to thank Erica, who agrees with us. She says, that's so true. And Jerry says, so true. 99% of people are like robots in society, which allow one another and which follow one another. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Sorry about that, Jerry. And they are afraid to take chances for their own future. On point. And Olive says, perfect point. Thank you so much,
yeah.
Olive, for all of you for being here. And those of you who are watching via Roku TV or Amazon TV, and you're sitting on your couch, or you're at your desk chair and you're saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. We appreciate your engagement, because truth knows truth, right? Doesn't matter
Right.
who shares it, it is. So I want to go beyond the power of branding in terms of signaling things to people. I want to ask you the question, what's the common pitfall of self-branding? And I think you've mentioned it earlier, especially if people get caught up in the ego. It's all about me, when in fact, the world, as several people I've heard recently say, the world doesn't think about you when you're not there. And even when you're there, they're thinking elsewhere. They're usually thinking about self or their own circumstances. But what's a common pitfall or pitfalls of self-branding?
Yeah, I think we already touched upon two. That is not being authentic and not being too self-centered. Actually, those are two common pitfalls to avoid. The third one that I would say is self-branding. Also, after a point, should not be solely on your opinions, beliefs. Right? It is about the art of getting continuous feedback and kind of
Mm,
evolving in that regard, especially the beliefs
wow.
and goals part,
Mhm,
because what
mhm,
will happen is if the personal branding or self branding is solely on your interest and things that you hold dear, you will be the only one that is impressed with this at the end, actually. But you need to get the pulse of your target audience, or even if you're exercising self branding within a team or within a situation or trying to get a new job, actually, you need to adapt a little bit in terms of how do your values fit with that
mhm,
company's or team's missions and values, and you need to find common ground in that regard. It's just making an effort that we are more often talking the same thing, but it's identifying what that common same thing is in that regard, actually. So uh, getting feedback or not getting feedback is the pitfall actually, where you always just stick to putting content out there but never listening what the other side has to say, actually. It cannot be a unidirectional exchange. It has to be, this is what I care about, do others care about that? If so, in what sense? Then taking that back in and then using it for your next set of talking points, actually. It's great that you shared that with me. Let me expand a little bit on what I think about this, actually. So that is a key thing to keep in mind, that it can not solely be only on your interest without any feedback whatsoever. The
I love
other
that.
common,
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
Go ahead,
Well,
please.
the other common pitfall that I see is early on when you are new in your career or just in a situation that you don't feel you are experienced, or in a position that you can put out your own opinions and thoughts. We all struggle with that lack of self confidence early on. What people do is they use other people's branding and content to just push it
Mm,
out there, saying that I really believe in this, and just kind of using that as a cover. You will get some success because maybe that branding and content is already uh, pre vetted and it's out there in the industry and people believe it. But that is a pitfall. That is not self branding. If you are using someone else's brand to just use yourself as kind of just be a channel of putting that content out, you're not adding any of your own thoughts and opinions of value in the mix, actually. So it can start that way, that people are often, when I started, right, I was learning more things. I would share articles and I would say, this is a great thing that I came across. But over time, the real self branding was based on the content and my own experiences. What is my takeaway from it, actually? What is that my version, and how does it apply to my own self? And that is what I shared with people, and that ended up becoming more practical and pragmatic versus just kind of being a messenger of other brands and contents, and putting content out there.
I think you speak to something that's powerful. And I remember a conversation with a professional who was retiring. She's on the East Coast, and she was talking about, I just need my daughter to talk with you because we were talking about the imposter syndrome. And
Right.
her daughter is well educated, uh, I, has had a lot of practical experience, but even in her late 30s, is still feeling like she's an imposter. She was hired because she's effective. She was hired because she actually achieved. She produces deliverables all the time, but feels like at some point someone's going to find her out and she's going to be removed from that position. And
Right.
what you're doing is you're saying, at the moment you have an idea, I mean, this is, I'm paraphrasing, literally take advantage of your own understanding. It didn't matter whether you're 15 years old, I use that number a lot, or whether you're 18, whether you're 30, whether you're 50. And of course, if you're into your 80s, there's an assumption that we know a lot more. Not necessarily, age is not necessarily a guarantee that we've developed our understanding. It's all about the person. So a 15-year-old may be much more talented in some areas than I have a clue or even need to be. And
Correct.
so that individual, whoever you are, whether it's you consider yourself to be akin to Anand or to Elnora or to someone else, really doesn't matter. Find you, illuminate your understandings at the core, your values. And if you don't know them, take the time to develop them. Ask the question, where did I get the ones I got? From people around me? Do they resonate with me? Are they the right ones? And then begin to share in the way that works for you, whether it is through social media, whether it's through articles, whether it's through writing your own books, whether it's through groups of people, whether it's one-on-one. Get
Yeah.
in sync with you. That is powerful. And no one of us is an imposter when we are our authentic selves.
Right. And that is really true, that forming an understanding will help you really connect and converse with people or teams for longer. Because if you are simply using a content at high level and passing it off, if someone has a question or asks you to go deep, you wouldn't be able to go deep because you don't have that baseline understanding of certain content, or anything that you're talking, actually. So it will show kind of over time that you are spreading yourself too thin and you're not actually investing time into your own self beliefs and working towards your goals, actually. So there is a plethora of content and topics. Choose the ones that matter to you and only go deep in those, actually, where you can really talk, connect, and share with people, rather than having a just a baseline, scratching the surface style understanding of many topics, but then never able to talk or get value from those actually at any point.
And what we're really emphasizing, and I agree with you 100%, Anand, it's valuable to leverage others. To, I mean, you could tell I read a lot. You can tell. I'm sure Anand is well versed in his particular area of expertise, and we want that. That does not mean you negate yourself in the process. In fact, that's where you get to illuminate more of you, because you may disagree with what you've read. You may have a different opinion based upon other research you've read or you've been part of, or lived experiences may be qualitatively different than what everybody else is saying because you're unique and you have your own response and reactions and understanding, intuitive sense about those experiences. So I want to go on to the next question.
Sure.
In what way does mindset really fit into this entire process of building one's own brand?
Yeah, great question. I think mindset is what will cause the overall make or break of this whole transformation that we are talking about,
Mm,
actually. And
mm,
to give you examples, right? The first is having a negative mindset. If you have that in terms of just not even being hopeful, you will quit on your first self branding attempt, actually, just thinking that there is no point in trying to put myself out there, there is no value, and then you will continue to kind of be in your comfort zone, in your shell, actually. So
mm,
you need to understand that this is not an overnight thing or a transformative journey that just happens at one time you share your thoughts or put content out, then it's done. It is a process and
mm,
requires patience, actually. So not trying to have a negative mindset is crucial. You should have an optimistic mindset or try to be positive, actually, in an ideal situation. The other is that ties into that is being open to feedback. If you are kind of the mindset that says, I believe in this, I don't want to hear what people have to say, then what is the whole point of self branding? Because you need to be receptive on how it is being perceived. And also, you need to clarify if there is any misrepresentation or just misperception going around, actually, for your version of self branding. Getting people aligned on the common understanding is crucial. So you need to be open to feedback at all times, especially if you are on the self-branding journey and you want to uh, get success out of this. The other point is that is not being self-critical.
mm,
If you are open to feedback, that not I certainly am open to feedback, but early on I would feel any constructive criticism would just kind of tank my morale down, actually.
mm,
It would kind of bring me back to square one and I would get lost.
mm,
So just trying to realize that this will evolve over time. You definitely should take learnings and have a learning mindset in that regard, that any constructive criticism will basically that becomes my next goal, that I will try to address that, and based upon the learning and research I will make sure that turns into a positive compliment at the end, actually. So but if you're self-critical and if you kind of always have this perfectionist or idealist self-branding version in your mind, even if you're open to feedback, that feedback will be of little value to you if
mm,
it kind of bothers you, irks you, or it just kind of causes kind of dismantling your own confidence in that regard.
mm. Yeah, it would be wonderful, or it will be wonderful when we create the right kinds of messaging across this globe that honors all of us and really encourages what you're talking about. And you're talking about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about, as people can see on the screen, we have a growth mindset says, Failure is an opportunity to grow. We've already referenced that. Uh, Challenges help me grow. And as you were saying earlier, Anand, use these messages to really get to a place where this is just an automatic wiring of one, so that you have a challenge. Great. Let's get into it. I like to try something new. How do we figure this out? Whereas the fixed mindset is just the inverse, it's the opposite. Failure reflects limitations. My limitations. I can't do anymore. I need to give up. I need to stick to what I know. I can't grow. Well, if that was the case with humans on this planet, we would we don't I don't even know that we would be on the planet at this time, considering all the transformations and the changes we've had to make over eons. We don't even know how long humans have really been here. As anthropologists continue to study, they learn more and they find more antiquities that suggest that we've been here more than just thousands of years. We've been here millions of years. But the reality is that we're always growing. But when we have the right kind of mindset, what happens, Anan?
Yeah, and I think one of the things I loved in that slide was I stick to what I know versus I like to try new things. So similarly to being open to feedback, another thing to keep in mind is having an open mind actually, which is really, really important, that you should be fine with other perspectives and other opportunities, and not try to define on what your boundaries are. Let them evolve over time actually, and that is where only true growth comes into play. And that is kind of when we talk from a mindset to a growth mindset, that how do you come up or develop that growth mindset in that regard. It will be really important that you are open to new challenges, perspectives, and feedback based on whatever efforts you are making actually.
Yeah, I thought, and I shared with you earlier about a book that it was really popular when it came out, and it's still valuable. It's entitled or titled "Mindset: The New Psychology of Success" by Carol Dweck, author and Stanford psychologist. So back in 2006, this book came out. It became all the rave, not only here in the U.S. but across in many other countries, certainly throughout Europe. And it's after decades of research that what she found as a renowned psychologist is that there's simple, groundbreaking idea, which is the power of mindset. And I want to read this very quickly, very efficiently. She writes, individuals who believe their talents can be developed through hard work, good strategies, and input from others, emphasis added, as you conveyed, have a growth mindset. They tend to achieve more than those with a more fixed mindset, those who believe their talents are innate gifts. I have it or I don't. This is because they worry less. The growth mindset person who achieves worries less about looking smart, and they put more energy into learning. When entire companies embrace a growth mindset, their employees report feeling far more empowered and committed. They also receive far greater organizational support for collaboration and innovation, part of what you were talking about earlier. In contrast, people at primarily fixed mindset companies report more of only one thing: cheating and deception among employees, presumably to gain an advantage in the talent race.
Yeah,
Powerful.
very, very powerful. Yes.
And then this visually, I love it because it makes it very clear for those of you viewing the screen. On the right is the growth mindset, and you see all the colors. Well, and literally, brain scientists see a lot of electromagnetic activity and colors firing. The synaptics firing in the brain when there's all this activity going, which reflect growth. And when people say, "Oh my God, my head's hurting as I'm learning," well, that is normal. And they don't realize that's what is happening when you're learning something new for the first time. You're creating new connections. But literally, metaphorically, this is accurate, and literally, this is accurate. And you could see here, what do you see here, Anand, on the fixed sign?
Yeah, it's definitely the things that we talked about, right? The fixed side is we are threatened by the success of others, which is a big point that just because I am not getting success with my self branding initially, that's common. It's as I said, a process and takes time. So not getting too intimidated by currently the existing brandings out there is critical in that regard. Unable to handle criticism or feedback, we already talked about that, like not to be too self-critical and also being open to feedback. So avoid challenges. We talked about being having an open mind in that regard. Actually, that is really kind of the great things that we are talking already in that regard. Effort is not regarded fruitful. That is also common, that you give up too easily. Actually, that is when a negative mindset or negative approach within the fixed mindset comes into play. That what is the point of all this, because this is not going anywhere in that regard, or you're always looking at the negative side actually. But what you should look at is you were able to overcome your kind of own self reservations about putting anything out there, connecting with the community, being your authentic self. And this is the first time you're showcasing it to a wider group of folks, actually. So look at the positive side. Yesterday, you were still sitting in the corner thinking on whether I should share this. Today, you already have shared it. So that is where it says you value learning over favorable outcome. Look at the silver lining for that cloud, actually, that you already passed that first hurdle of will I ever be able to speak up or share something with the community. Well, you already did that. So now it's focusing on how can I message it better? How can I connect on what the community or audience is looking for? And then I can probably refine my own beliefs and goals to present it in an easy to understand manner for my target audience.
I want to show this screen too, to just kind of summarize it as I want to share this story. And I'm sure you have a story, probably many of these stories, Anand, or maybe I'm just unique. I'm the only one. That I just remember feeling like, oh my goodness, I just messed up. I didn't do, I read all the cards as opposed to look at my audience or I, and I'm in my teens, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm just freaking out and I'm thinking, oh my God, everybody thinks I'm terrible. And all this self-talk, which is what you're talking about, guard against it. If it happens, it's going to happen. That's okay. Then just honor it. Go get some water, fresh water, and then drink and say, okay, or whatever you like. If you get a piece of, reward yourself, some popcorn, get a piece of wonderful chocolate, something that you really enjoy, and just say, I'm so proud of myself. I did it. I did what was uncomfortable. It doesn't matter whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. You have the capacity to exceed your current expectations of yourself. That's a little bit redundant. We want you to understand the power of living in the space of a growth mindset, even if you're wired to be fixed. Everything's the way it is because that's what I've been reared to believe. And you're moving, you're shifting. And it may mean shifting out of the organization that you're in that is so wired to fix. You are only this widget, when in fact you're a total human being. You're not a widget. You're feeling, you're sentient. You've got an intellectual mind, you've got an emotional mind, you've got capacity that really scientists don't even know what it is. We say
Um,
that where have you heard this, Anand? That we're using at best, maybe even the geniuses, maybe 15% of our capacity.
Right. Yeah. That no,
And
that's really true, and that ties into the potential and self belief. That if you push yourself and go out of that comfort zone, wonders will happen. Maybe they're abstract, they're not kind of totally tangible and evident, but there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes in terms of that transformation that might all only make sense over time, and consider those as pieces in the puzzle in that regard.
so I'm going to ask you this last question, although I can go on for another hour with you easily, I am certain. How does one develop a growth mindset to position themselves for leading? And I think some people are probably saying, I think I already heard some examples, but what say you?
Yeah, I think as key takeaways on how to develop that growth mindset is one important thing to know is when you are trying to develop self branding, don't try to appear as a know it all actually. Just kind of embrace your own shortcomings and vulnerabilities in terms of what you don't know, you don't know. And that's the reason that you are going with the self branding. That is, you are sharing what you have known and learned to basically hear from the community and the audience in terms of what are some missing gaps in your own knowledge base that you can use to continue to expand and build stronger beliefs actually, or develop a deeper understanding. So embracing your own shortcomings is important when you want to develop a growth mindset. The other thing is, while we talked a lot about feedback and getting external feedback, a key piece is self reflect actually. I still would go at the end of the week or when I have time, look at my talk or my communication or my article, and then self reflect on uh, did I capture what I wanted to here? Did I use the correct flow? What was that ideal version of this form of communication that I had in mind? And how did it turn out? And what are some gaps that I can even try to bridge them in my next engagement, actually? So self reflection is key while you always get for external feedback, because external feedback can differ from person to person, and it might be difficult to identify a common pattern. And you might be, again, stretched when you try to cater to each and every form of feedback that becomes available to you. So self reflection should be kind of the number one thing, along with seeing if that thing is already being mentioned in the feedback that is incoming to you, actually. The last takeaway that I want to share, or how to develop, is the key here is develop, right? Development takes time. So identify that immediate checkpoint or milestone or small initiatives. Um, Complete that and then iterate and improve upon that actually. There is no point in starting with your 5-year lofty goal right from the start. You can definitely start with that, but you need to work backwards in what needs to happen in the next 1 month, what needs to happen in that next 3 months, and you need to kind of have more uh, I would say small initiatives, because that does help our psyche at the end of the day in terms
Mm.
of, it's not quick wins, but it's at least having some progress or some visible success that what I am trying is really working or not. Because you definitely need, at least if not immediate outcomes, you need some checkpoints or milestones in your growth mindset journey to know what you need to tweak and course correct in kind of getting your end goal.
As you were talking, what was coming to mind are the different professions that are out there across the planet. Whether and I just did an exercise because I could, uh, listing just off the top of my head some of the industry areas: agriculture, food, natural resources, architecture, construction, education, training, business management, administration, arts, audio, visual, technology, communications, finance, government, public administration, hospitality, tourism, healthcare, human resources, IT, law, security, manufacturing, transportation, science, marketing, engineering, math, the whole area that mathematicians literally are replete. And I can just go on and on and on. Every industry benefits from having individuals who are clear about self, are clear about their own values, operate often authentically, so that they're spending their time. Each one of us is spending our time doing the kind of work, heavy lifting, that allows our organizations, our communities, our society to benefit. If we're masquerading, trying to be something we're not, we're having to spend too much energy and effort that actually weighs us down. And so when we're talking about self branding, we're really talking about elevating the spirit of one, right?
Yeah.
Anand? How would you
Absolutely.
summarize this discussion we just had?
Yeah, I think the summary for me is around two things. First is to not be focused on a favorable outcome, because you will get that favorable outcome, but there is no guarantee of timeline or how soon or how late it will happen. So don't try to have, even when you have a growth mindset, don't try to fixate yourself on a favorable outcome that uh, it's not guaranteed that just because you're attempting something, there's a natural success that will come out of that. So always value learning over favorable outcomes, actually.
Mm,
And that will motivate you, or that will give you the courage to take risks outside your comfort zone, because that was kind of the key element when we were comparing the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. This is what I know versus I don't know this, but looks interesting. I can learn it and see what comes out of it. So taking
mm,
the risk and stepping out of that comfort zone is really key. So if you're not fixating on a tangible outcome just yet, that is what will cause you to take some risk. Based on that risk, you will definitely get some value or learning that you probably didn't know yesterday. Maybe you don't get the full picture, but you know at least something more about any given topic than you did yesterday. And if you make that an iteratable cycle and put self reflection and feedback, that will naturally cause evolution to have a self brand of yourself along
mm.
with a growth mindset.
Yeah, I love the whole notion of continuous feedback. That's a whole nother discussion. And
Yeah,
we should just have a session on continuous feedback, how to create it, how to inspire it, how to leverage it, and not get stuck in it. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Anand. It's
thank
been
you.
a pleasure. I am so proud of you for choosing to show up, to stand up in the various spaces where you do, as a volunteer board member, as the president of your alumni association, for your university, as an engineer, as a manager, as a person who values people and choosing to lead by example. I honor you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words. And I learned a lot equally, actually, even just by sharing what I know. I took the risk to come on this and not think about whether people will like it or not. I just came, shared my experiences, and that learned a lot from you, Dr. Webb. And I'm already going with way more insights than I originally had in 1 hour back.
My pleasure. You're a gem. Keep
Thank you.
moving, making a difference, and I love to see you back here in the future.
Absolutely. Would love to be here. Thank you.
Ah, okay, Jet, take it away. I look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday, Lead Live here, Pacific Standard Time at noon and Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. And wherever you're at on the planet, we welcome you to be part of this, to leave inspired and ideally with some tools to use